Davy Crockett was born in Kentucky in the year 1786. He was born in a relatively poor family in Kentucky, and the situation that he was born into, with not a lot of money, and that caused them to not be able to afford food or a place to live close to any kind of a settlement. So they lived out in the woods, and with not a whole lot of food to eat. So Davy Crockett was raised having to hunt and trap and fish for most everything he ate. They did a little bit of farming with what they had, a little bit of wild livestock, but not a whole lot. So Davy Crockett is well known for how much of an outdoorsman he was and how much of a lover of the outdoors he was. And he is known for this because of the situation he was born into and where he was born into. So the area he was born into was a heavily forested area in Kentucky by the Appalachian Mountains. There was a plentiful amount of game in this area, and he had plenty to hunt and to fish and to gather food for his family. Into Davy Crockett's young adult years, he was married. He met a woman while he was lost in the woods who was also lost. They made it out of the woods together, and they stayed on a farmer's porch to be protected from the wildlife. This woman's name, his first wife's name was Pollyanna. Him and Pollyanna were married, and after they were married, Davy Crockett sold his rifle to buy a horse so that they could start a future together. They moved to Lincoln County, where they tried to start a farm. What they did in Lincoln County didn't work out, and they weren't very successful there, so they moved on to Franklin County. And in Franklin County, they moved there in early 1811, just before the War of 1812. They'd been living there for about a year, and the British had supplied the Native Americans in the area with weapons, and the Native Americans had massacred a nearby town. This was in 1812, and after this, this started the Creek and Indian Wars. Davy Crockett played a very significant role in the Creek and Indian Wars. He was one of their scouts, and so he rode on horseback to scout out the area and try and find where the Native Americans were at. He was the only man capable of this job because of his training in the outdoors that he had while he was a young child. This training that he had been given also came in handy because the soldiers were not U.S. military. They were just settlers in the area trying to protect themselves, which means they didn't have funds for ammunition and food. So Davy Crockett went out and he used his hunting skills to actually get the soldiers provisions, and he hunted for the majority of the food that they ate. After the Creek and Indian War, his wife Polly had died, and he had 2 children with Polly. He decided that he needed to find another wife for his children, so he remarried, and he married Elizabeth Patent. Elizabeth Patent was a widow, and her late husband had been a very successful man, and he'd been in a rich family. This left her with a large inheritance. Davy Crockett used that inheritance to start a mill, and he also started the beginning of his political career. Davy Crockett was first elected as the colonel of the local militia. Then later he was elected to the state legislature, and this election to the state legislature, he was in there for 1 term. He helped a lot of people while he was there, but he had made one mistake. There were a bunch of people, it was actually a whole town, had been devastated by a natural disaster, and he and many of the other legislators thought that they needed to provide them support, so they sent them money to support them through this hard time. This isn't constitutionally correct, so he wasn't recalled, and so after his failed second election, he moved out to Texas. These were Davy Crockett's last days when he moved out to Texas. He got to Texas and he said that this land was the greatest land he had ever seen. He, like many other men, moved out to Texas so that they could start farms with the free land that the Mexicans were giving out for people to come into their country, so they could have more citizens. The Americans, though, were still loyal to America, and many of them rebelled against the rule of the Mexican government. So in retaliation, the Mexican government had fought in them and destroyed many of their cities. Davy Crockett went and helped defend the Alamo, where he was killed by the Mexican forces that were sent to the Alamo to fight off the American rebels as they saw them. His last days in the Alamo were full of bravery and courage. He fought with everything he had due to his early childhood of hunting and trapping, and the legends that had gone out about him from the Creek and Indian Wars. He was placed with a leadership role over a small group of men, and was placed in the most dangerous area to protect it. This area was the last area overrun, but he did not stop fighting. He fought even when he was out of bullets. There are many pictures of him swinging a rifle. There were a few survivors who remembered seeing him swinging a rifle because he was out of ammo, fighting people off. And he was a very brave man, and he died in the Alamo. And this is the conclusion of Davy Crockett's life.